Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and with me, as usual, is your other co-host, John. John, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. I rolled into Ottawa, Canada around, 3:30 in the morning today.
That's early.
So,
or late, depending on how you want to think about it.
yeah. It was a little bit of both, definitely, because we rolled out, I think, around like 11:30, and then so I was able to sleep for a little bit on the ride there, and then cross the border, which of course you got to get up, you got to go, you got to do the whole rigmarole, all the thing, and then get back. And then we showed up to our hotel here in Ottawa around like 5:30 in the morning. So it's been a long, long day. I'm pretty exhausted. My sleep schedule is all messed up, but I went through these games. And a lot of crazy stuff happened. I was trying to keep track of it as I was going through at work, but it's tough. But got a lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, not just within the Big Ten. We're going to talk about some other things on the national level as well. So yeah, dude. But overall, man, no major complaints. Things are good. I'm going to be celebrating Thanksgiving in Manchester, New Hampshire this year. So
all right. Well, yeah. As long as you're celebrating. As long as you take the time, hopefully, to celebrate. At least they don't make you perform on Thanksgiving, do they?
No. We got the day
that's
off.
good.
Yeah. But and Manchester's nice. It's a nice New England town, so
sure.
I don't mind it.
Although, how disappointing is it that the Egg Bowl is no longer on Thanksgiving?
It's weird. I don't like it.
Like, I get why those fan bases don't want it. Like, I get that. Yeah. You want Thanksgiving. You don't want your football game to mess with Thanksgiving. But, like, it was really nice for everybody else to be able to watch that.
Yeah, it's true. I'm just disappointed. Well, no, maybe I only got one thing. Yeah. I think I only have one show on Friday night. So I might actually get to watch the vast majority of the Gopher football game on Friday.
Nice.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Black Friday at 11. I don't know, man. It's going to be weird. But we can talk about that when we get to Minnesota. My theory is that attendance is not going to be great because it's the deer hunting opener and it's the Friday right after Thanksgiving. So how many people that normally would have, you know what I mean? So my theory is that attendance is going to be like I think it's going to be like a thing where there's way more people watching on TV, but maybe fewer people watching in person.
I think the TV networks are okay with that, because I do think there's going to be a lot of, no, I think they're going to be just fine. But I also do think there's going to be a lot of people watching. I think it is kind of interesting. I know I mentioned to you a couple days ago how what they call the quadrangle of hate, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska. I think that's kind of cool that they're all four of those teams are being featured. Because there is so much animosity between all four schools. So that's kind of cool in a way. But it's rivalry week, man. So anything can happen.
It's rivalry week, so get excited.
Yeah.
Yes.
How about you, man?
The greatest week of the year, really.
It really is, dude. I love it. And it's great. I love it, and it's also terrifying. So
always. I'm walking around.
Anything can happen.
My stomach is in knots all week. It already is.
Yep.
I started getting nervous on this past Friday night, and I was nervous for Penn State, but I was already kind of nervous for Wisconsin. Yep. So, rivalry week is great. We've got a lot of interesting rivalries this year, and this week, and we will get to reviewing all the Week 13 games. But before we get into it, we have to say, there's been a lot of talk about the playoff, and there were a lot of people the last couple weeks beating their chests and loudly saying, hey, there's 5 SEC teams that are all national title contenders, and they all deserve to be in the playoff. And that's including, I think, 4 of those teams are 2-loss teams, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, a lot of people saying that Indiana was overrated, that Indiana couldn't win in the SEC, that Penn State couldn't win in the SEC, which, I don't know if they pay attention when Penn State plays I know they pissed away that bowl game last year, but generally when Penn State plays the SEC out of conference, it goes pretty well for Penn State.
Yeah.
They were saying they couldn't compete. And then out of those 5 SEC contenders, 3 2-loss teams are no longer 2-loss teams because they lost a third game.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss lost 24-17 to unranked Florida. So that's rough. And then you've got Texas A&M, which lost in 4 overtimes to lowly Auburn, who's having a terrible season.
Mm-hmm.
Auburn is a terrible season. And then the top dog of them all, the pinnacle, the cornerstone of the SEC, the team that has been carrying the SEC on its back for the last 17, 18 years. Alabama, the Alabama Crimson Tide, lost to unranked and previously not even bowl eligible Oklahoma. And not only did the Alabama lose to Oklahoma, but the final score was 24-3. 3 points. That's your national title contender. 3 points in a must-win game. 3 points.
Yeah. Yep. And just be prepared if it hasn't happened already. I haven't been able to pay much attention, but for SEC ESPN to try to twist that narrative to somehow make it look like the SEC is still the strongest conference in 2024, when in fact that's just not the case at all.
Not just that, they're going to try to talk you into 3-loss teams getting into the college football playoff.
Yeah.
3-loss teams, 3 losses.
I'm sure Paul Feinbaum is all over it.
Oh yeah, they're already. I've already seen people laying the groundwork and whatever. So here's what I'm gonna say. What about Illinois?
Yeah.
What about Illinois? Illinois is gonna be 9-3. They're a 3-loss team in the best conference in college football this year, the Big Ten. So if you want to tell me that any of those 3-loss SEC teams should still be title contenders, then what I'm going to say to you is, what about Illinois?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, what are Illinois' losses? Penn State, Minnesota. and what's Illinois' other loss?
Let me double check.
It's not bad though. It's not like a bad loss.
I don't think
it
is. It is Penn State, Oregon. Come on.
Oregon. Yeah. So 2 top 5 teams and Minnesota.
Yep.
A Minnesota team that, has we'll talk about Minnesota when we get to it. But the point is
we will.
We'll get there. The point is, these SEC teams just aren't dominant. And don't tell me it's because the SEC is deep, because for all those years, when the Big Ten would cannibalize itself, everybody said, no, if your teams were truly elite, then they'd come out at the top. It's not about conference depth. It's about who's on top. And now they want to say it's about conference depth.
Absolutely.
But they don't have the argument there either. And I will bet you anything that come bowl season, the Big Ten will have a winning record against the SEC. I'm going on record right now. This year, 2024-25, in the playoff, college football playoff, and in the bowls combined, the Big Ten will have a winning record against the SEC. I'm saying it.
I agree, man. I think so too. I've been seeing a lot of SEC fans come after, the Penn States and the Indianas and whatever of the Big Ten this past week. Obviously trying to discredit Indiana now because they got destroyed by Ohio State, who, let's just totally discount the fact that they're a national title contending championship caliber team.
National title contender.
Yeah. Let's just forget all that. And that's what happened. And by the way, Indiana was holding their own for a while. I'm not saying that, it was great. It wasn't. I'm not trying to
We'll go in depth.
defend,
We'll go in depth
but
on that, but we'll talk
yeah.
about it. But there are
But it's
good
still,
and bad things that came out of that game.
yeah, but it's a silly argument. And then also,
Yeah.
same thing with Penn State against a really, and again, we'll get into this too, but like a better than what you think Minnesota team, they're, in my opinion, and I'm not just saying it, from, I mean, I am biased, but I'm saying it from trying to have some, actual perspective on it too, that this is a better team than what their record shows. But I think
based on SP Plus, it is for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, man, the top teams that are going into the college football playoff with the Big Ten all deserve to be there. I don't care who they lost to. And records matter, period. As much as obviously we've seen Florida State fall this year, and what happened last year in their bowl game, but to also take into account most of their players dropped out of the bowl game last year.
Yeah.
So, but Florida State deserved to be there, and they didn't get in favor of Alabama.
Yeah,
because
they went
they're an SEC
undefeated
team.
in a power conference and got
Yep.
shut out of a playoff. And
Records
all those
matter.
players who didn't play in that bowl game, they would have played if it was the playoff.
Absolutely.
So it's not. So we would have, that would have been an actually interesting game.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Instead, we got Alabama, and guess what? Alabama got rejected by the Big Ten. So there.
Yep.
So that's what happened. And then the Big Ten won the national title.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the Big Ten, I believe, had the best or tied for the best record in bowl season.
Yep.
So the Big Ten, again, I pissed off a lot of SEC fans on Twitter today. I said, the Big Ten is clearly the best conference this year. You can't tell me it's not. And come postseason, you're going to see that.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see that.
Well, they were the best conference last year, too. I mean,
last year, too.
Yeah, the last couple of years.
And Michigan proved it by going undefeated and winning the national title.
Yeah. I just love the guys that pull up like statistics from like the past. They're like, oh, well, how about look at the past 15, 16 years? I'm like, well, are we living in the present or are we living in the past?
Right now.
What matters? Is it today or is it what happened 15 years ago? Because I mean, when it comes to football and what's going on the field week to week, I'm pretty sure it matters what's going on here in 2024. That's what I'm paying attention to. And that's what I'm referring to. And I think you are as well.
I mean, I think that all that really matters in football and rivalries and everything is the last game and the next game.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything that's that relevant outside of last year and this year.
Mm-hmm.
In college football, a couple years is a long time. So yeah, it's been this way. It's probably going to be this way. And they're saying it now because they know that at the end of the day, Ohio State or Oregon is probably going to be the national champion.
Yeah.
And they're trying to say this now so that they can still try to justify to themselves that their precious SEC is somehow the best, even when they're not the best on the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you got the Heather Diniches of the world, the Paul Feinbaums out there, the Josh Pates, who will be, waving the flag, the SEC flag and trying to push them into the college football playoff discussions as much as they possibly can.
Alabama scored 3 points against a 5-win team. 3. That's really, I mean, they couldn't do anything. Jalen Milroe looked like he'd never played before.
Wow.
I mean, he doesn't look like a quarterback who can lead you to anything.
Nope.
I don't know, man. I don't buy it. No. And we're not going to sit down and pretend like the Big Ten is second banana anymore because it's not.
No.
Because it's not.
No.
And the Big Ten has proven superiority on the field. So sorry, SEC fans. You can tell yourself whatever you want, but the rest of the country isn't paying attention to you anymore. They're not listening to your opinion anymore. They're not taking it for granted from the ESPN talking heads anymore that the SEC is better because it just, over the last couple years, has not been.
Yep.
Hasn't been.
And I think it's going to continue to change and move in that direction. Now, I'm not saying the SEC is obviously going to just drop off the cliff, but the Big Ten is no longer going to be looked at as a subpar counterpart to them.
I mean, I think that.
Go ahead.
I think the Big Ten and the SEC are going to be very close to even every year. They have very similar resources. They're going to have very similar success on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And like the SEC doesn't like that, and ESPN doesn't like that. They want the SEC to be superior. But that era of college football is over, and it ended when they started paying players NIL. Because before, all these Big Ten teams were playing by the rules, and the cheaters were, you know, Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and whatever, right?
Yeah.
And everyone kind of knew it. And in the SEC, everybody was cheating.
Everyone.
And so the recruiting rankings reflected that. But now that the money is evening out, all of a sudden the SEC, like, yeah, if you look at the recruiting rankings, they recruit a little better, but it's not enough to be meaningfully different.
Mm-hmm.
Because all recruiting is a range, and a lot of it comes down to buy-in, evaluation, development, and system fit. Like, so they aren't big drop-offs. It's like when you get to that level, all the athletes are really good. So yeah, there are different levels of athleticism throughout the Big Ten and SEC, but it's relatively, if you're looking at the conferences side by side from best to worst, it's pretty even from top to bottom.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, the SEC's golden boy was the one who pretty much kind of gave everybody a heads up about this, and Nick Saban. Like, there's a reason. I mean, of course, yes, he's old and he wanted to retire. I get that. But I think he saw the writing on the wall. He saw what was coming, and he's talked about NIL. He's talked about the transfer portal, and basically being like, yeah, it's too much. And maybe he foresaw himself, maybe not, having instead of leaving with most of his dignity intact, he might have found himself struggling more and more, and that could have ruined in his mind his legacy. And
I mean, he already was his last 3 years. He didn't win a national title, so he already had slipped a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm sure he just saw the writing on the wall. It was just going to get harder. So
yeah,
he left while he could, and I think that was smart on his part. But he talked about it, and I think he was kind of pointing to the fact of everybody within the SEC and the Big Ten, the big dogs that are all out there. That this isn't just, it's not, the playing field is no longer what it was. It's not what we used to. We are no longer being able to like buy and sell whoever we want, and everybody else is forced to play by the rules but us, because we're being propped up by different media companies and the conference itself, frankly.
The good programs are better and the best programs are worse.
Yeah.
So it's gotten where it was like a lot. Now it's still different, right? That helmet schools still have the advantages, but the difference, they don't have the mammoth. It's much more competitive now. There's a lot more parity, and there's going to be more parity. Yes. Yes, because there's no reason why 4 or 6 schools should dominate a sport.
No.
There's no reason for that. That's boring.
And that's why the 14 playoff was so freaking miserable. Honestly, dude, it was
terrible.
I barely watched it the last 4 or 5 years. I couldn't. I was so bored. I would pay attention, but it was mostly just on in the background because I didn't care. It was the same freaking teams every year. Mattered not to me for the most part. And so it just, now with the expanded college football playoff, with NIL, with the transfer portal, now things are fascinating. I'm really excited to see this 12-team college football playoff. I think it's going to be really exciting. And even if all of the teams that everyone predicts to go to the top get to the top, it's still awesome to see some of these other teams get a shot, get a real fair shot.
And get to host a game on campus where college football is supposed to be played.
Yes, which I think 2 rounds should be played on campus, by the way, not just one. But
dude, I wish the national title was a home game.
That'd be amazing.
I wish it was all on campus. I would put all of it. I would get rid of the bowls entirely. I would have the bowls be the bowls and have the playoff just be on. I mean, that'll never happen ever.
No, but it'd be cool.
But I'm with you. It would be cool if the first 2 rounds were both on campus. But yeah, we are getting off our original point, which is that the SEC is overrated, and they've proven it over and over again all year. Full stop, because what matters is who wins and who loses. I don't make the rules. That's a game. That's how the game is set up. It's wins and losses. And if you don't get the wins, too bad. Too bad.
Yep.
That's how it goes. That's football.
Yep, I'm with you.
All right, moving on. We've got some drama in Iowa City. So it was reported preemptively, or at least the rumor got out on the internet, and everyone believed it, that, when Iowa QB Brendan Sullivan went down, the rumor is that former starting quarterback Cade McNamara had left the program. And people were saying, Iowa fans especially, were saying terrible things about Cade McNamara on Twitter. I mean, it was ugly. It was nasty. It was personal, etc. So that happens for like a few days. And then Cade McNamara himself puts out an Instagram statement and is like, hey, I haven't left the team. I'm practicing with the team. I can't go to the game this weekend because I'm in concussion protocol, but I'm absolutely going to be there to play against Nebraska. So that's what happened last week. But then when Iowa put out a depth chart this week, Cade wasn't on it. So is that because he hasn't been cleared yet? Is that gamesmanship from Kirk Ferentz? Like, who's gonna line up at quarterback for Iowa on Black Friday? I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna know until it happens.
Well, I think it's interesting. Well, first off, I'm just going to address the first thing that, like, about how embarrassing and distasteful some of the fans and the people that were saying what they were saying about this is a player. And I understand, it's NIL, they're quote unquote professionals now, which, I mean, yes, they are. Shouldn't even say that, but and he got paid a lot of money. So yeah. I understand people being upset. I understand people being upset about Caden Proctor. But some of the things that I saw and both of us saw being said were, it's like, rein it in, man, grow up
for real.
It's just totally unnecessary in my opinion.
And it wasn't isolated. It was a lot of people.
It was a lot. This wasn't just a couple people. This was a lot of people jumping on board.
This was enough for it to be somewhat representative of a decent portion of the Hawkeye fan base, for sure.
Yeah. If something like that happened at Minnesota, of course, you and I would be upset about it, but I would not be hurling personal attacks at this person. Like, it's
especially because when you don't even know the story.
Exactly. There you go.
It turned out he hadn't left they all got angry because he was selfish and left the program, took his ball and went home. Apparently he didn't. Apparently he's just been hurt. And
I think the same kind of thing happened with Caden Proctor. Like, they were saying, like, oh, he just took all the money and ran, when he actually didn't get paid. They didn't gather all the facts. And supposedly the story is, anyways, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is not the real story, but what I was told at the end of all of that, from what I recall, is that he didn't actually receive any funds because he didn't fulfill a certain point of the contract. And so, he would have had he stayed, but he didn't. So he left and he went back to Alabama. But I don't know, man. It's, gather all the facts before you start hurling out stuff like that personally. I think that's it's tasteless and totally unnecessary. Yeah. Express your frustration and anger, fine. But some of the stuff I was seeing was pretty ridiculous. So
yeah.
But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see if he actually shows up against Nebraska, or who knows, maybe after all that he is like, yeah, I'm done, I quit, which I don't know. Can't say I'd blame him either for that.
Or maybe he's still in the concussion protocol and can't play.
That's also very possible.
Or maybe he lines up and leads them to victory on Friday. I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm interested to see.
Yes,
it's been a dramatic, we'll talk about Iowa more when we get to their game, but it's been kind of a dramatic year in a lot of ways in Iowa City.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Expectations were real high for a lot of
reasons. All right. Should we go through these Big Ten games?
Yep, let's do it.
First up, we had on Friday night, the 5-6 Michigan State Spartans 24, the 1-10 Purdue Boilermakers 17. This was a tale of two halves. Sparty scored 3 touchdowns and a field goal on their first 4 possessions, but struggled to move the ball basically the entire second half. Purdue was able to take advantage and get back into the game. The Boilermakers had 2 chances to tie the game late. The first ended in a tipped interception. The next featured a play where Purdue wide receiver Jamal Edrin got behind the defense, but dropped what would have likely been a touchdown pass. Purdue turned the ball over on downs at midfield with 3:05 left. After a hot start, this ended up being a pretty underwhelming day from Spartan QB Aiden Childs, who finished just 15 for 31, 5.1 yards per attempt, 2 TDs, and 0 picks. He flashed in the first half, but in the second half, it just was not happening. Running back Kayron Lynch-Adams had a decent day, running for 85 yards and 4.7 yards per rush. Nobody stuck out too much catching the ball as the catches were spread around a lot. Montori Foster had 4 for 59 yards and a touchdown. Shout out to Michigan State linebacker Jordan Turner, who had 3 tackles, a tackle for loss, and that key interception. For Purdue, quarterback Hudson Card, he had an okay game, going 26 for 47, 342 yards, 1 TD, and 1 pick. But Purdue flat out couldn't run the ball at all. They ended up with 19 yards rushing. Woof. Tight end Max Clare was his usual productive self with 7 catches for 83 yards and a TD. Wide receiver Jamal Edrin had 5 for 87 yards, but he had the drop that could have tied the game. So, yeah, that's kind of the year it's been for Purdue. John, what did you think about this one?
This is just another heartbreaker, and for the Purdue Boilermakers, man, it's so tough to watch this team. And I again, I know I championed Hudson Card all off season, and there's still just a part of me that, like, you see how hard this guy plays, and I mean, he still threw for 342 yards.
Yeah,
it was, the Joe Rossi bend don't break defense that kept them from getting into the end zone, which is to be expected. But
yeah,
he was all over that field, running, making plays, doing whatever he could possibly do. And I just can't imagine, after the last 2 years, like, feeling the way he feels and seeing him just desperately try to make something out of this team, and it just never comes to fruition. Now, it was good to see Max Clare have a good game, and Jamal Edrin as well, kind of help him out here and there, which it looked like they might have had some momentum and they could have maybe made something happen here. And obviously it was a much closer game, and could have, turned out to be a different outcome had Sparty's defense not been able to hold up, considering that offense did not do anything in the second half, which is a little crazy, because I thought in the first half Aiden Childs looked phenomenal. He was
awesome.
Dime.
It looked like Sparty was going to roll. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that was a little odd that they stalled out like that, but that also seems like pretty typical of this Spartan offense of this last year, that it's very hit and miss, feast and famine type of thing, tale of two halves. But they obviously did enough in the first half, and Purdue's offense just couldn't do enough to stop them. And obviously Purdue's defense, as per usual, was not enough to stop them in the first half to get them up that high, to run up the score that high. So it's just another game for Purdue that we've seen happen a million times before or all season, I guess. And and last season. And I don't see at this point how anyone could argue against keeping Ryan Walters at Purdue.
You don't see how anyone can argue against it?
Argue for it. Sorry, argue for keeping it. Sorry, yeah. I don't understand how anyone can defend having, keeping Ryan Walters on staff as the head coach at this point in time. I feel like he has to go at the end of the season.
You can go 1-11 in year one,
mm-hmm.
but you can't win 3 games in year one and then go 1-11 in year two. And not just go 1-11, but Purdue played pretty well. They fought hard, but it's always the same thing, right? The other team gets way up and stops playing with an edge, and then Purdue gets back into the game, right?
Yep.
It's never Purdue going blow for blow with anybody. And that's only been 3 of the games this year. In 5 of the conference games, they've gotten crushed.
Mm-hmm.
So they've had, and they don't, I'm with you, man. I'll be honest. When Ryan Walters, a former defensive coordinator, decided he was going to call offensive plays, I was like, how's this going to go, really? And I don't know. It's just everything at Purdue is just kind of weird, and it's not working. And it's all magnified by what's going on in Bloomington. So, yeah, man, I think if Purdue, is going to be anything ever more than just a basketball school, I do think I'm with you. That said, I will say this game was exciting. You have to give credit to Purdue for continuing to play hard. They have not quit on head coach Ryan Walters, which they could have. A lot of teams would have quit right now. Yeah. But again, they've only been close in 3 conference games, and they've managed to lose all 3 of them. And I only think it's going to get worse because now you've got a pissed off Indiana team, and Curt Cignetti is trying to earn style points with the College Football Playoff Committee. I think Indiana is going to go nuclear on Purdue. And it's been a long time since Indiana won the old Oaken Bucket. Purdue has owned that thing for the whole Jeff Brom era, essentially. Yeah. But that's over. That's over now. So I hope, Purdue fans, you might want to get in and see the bucket one more time, because when you give it up to Indiana on Saturday, I genuinely don't have any idea when you're going to see it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't, Cignetti's long term, they inked now they're going to apparently pony up and pay as much as Ohio State for assistant coaches. So Indiana is not going, it's not a 1-year cute thing. They're like not going away. So Purdue, It's your move, Purdue. And I think they're going to have to cut ties with Ryan Walters. And I think when Curt Cignetti wins the old Oaken Bucket 70-3 on Saturday, and I do think it's going to be something crazy like that, 56-0, something like that. I think it's going to be clear.
Yeah. Well, one more question for you pertaining to the Purdue Boilermakers. Where do you think Dylan Thieneman, Max Clare, and Devin Maccabee will be next year?
Does Maccabee still have more eligibility?
He's a junior.
It feels like he's been there since the Obama administration. It feels like he's been there forever. I guess it's his distinct running style. That's it just feels like I've been watching it for a long time. I hope for Purdue's sake, the new head coach talks them into staying. I do. For their sake, I hope that that's what happens. That said, I don't know if we could use Dylan Thieneman, but Max Clare, if you want to come play ball for the Gophers,
I'll take you.
Yeah, you could come. We had our tight end catch a touchdown pass on Saturday. You could come do that here. That's totally a thing. So yeah, man, they will be people that are, there will be people trying to tamper with them for sure. I hope for Purdue's sake that they fire Ryan Walters immediately after the season's over, that they find, you have to kind of find your coach in a couple days so that he can talk the players into staying. Yeah. So they have to hire somebody quickly. Maybe they go get, Jason Candle's been there forever waiting for a head coaching job, doing a really good job at Toledo, I want to say. And then, there's some guys out there, group of 5 level guys. Maybe you should go with that and not an unproven coordinator like you did last time. Maybe pick a guy who's been a head coach before. Just a thought, Purdue. Yeah.
Good luck. Sorry to not
luck.
spend enough time on the Spartans because you guys did pretty well. I thought it was pretty solid. One more thing I just wanted to say is the Joe Rossi defense definitely showed up, and that's what we expected for sure. So have fun with that, Michigan State.
It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Aiden Childs next year. Yeah. Is he going to be the same guy as this year, or is he going to cut down on the picks and suddenly just be terrifying?
I'm leaning towards terrifying.
Yeah, probably.
Because I've seen too many flashes where I'm like, this kid, if someone can just mold him, get him to just slow down his game a little bit, to make those decisions that, a little bit slower and make sure he's making the right choices. He scares the crap out of me, dude. Because you see him do things that most players don't do until they're like juniors or seniors. And even if that, like, he's a freak athlete. He's what? He's 6'2", 215, almost 220. I don't know,
Yeah, he's
something
a
like
big
that.
dude.
He's a big dude, and he can move, and he's agile, and
Yeah.
he's got a massive arm. And when he's on, he's on. I mean, he throws balls into places that are absolutely insane. So,
well, and Nick
me.
Marsh is only a frosh, so like the two of them together next year could be interesting. Dude. Yeah,
I think if they get the right guy with him, I think that he could be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten by next year.
Yeah, I think so too.
Or he'll,
or he'll flame, or he'll, or he's going to be the exact same guy, and it's going to be infuriating for everybody.
Yeah.
I think that's
quarter to quarter, just like what are we going to get?
Yeah, that's yeah. So it'll be fun to track that. Michigan State for sure. I saw a Michigan State fan on Twitter say that they absolutely should make the college football playoff next year, to which I would say maybe pump the brakes a little. Just a little bit. But you know what? In the era of Kurt Signetti, dream big. Dream big.
And Jonathan Smith is a great coach.
He's a really good coach. Sure.
So, yeah, maybe they have a shot.
Maybe. They also might lose 7 games. I don't know. It depends on Aiden Childs, man. It depends on Aiden Childs. I was looking at their schedule. I was thinking these could all be losses, but also most of these could be wins. I don't know. Yeah.
We'll see. It's exciting.
Yeah. Right on. And then it'll be interesting to see. I think Sparty, they end up against Rutgers in trying to get some bowl seating. Or trying to get into a bowl, I guess. So they could still make it if they can beat Rutgers, right? I think it's Rutgers.
It is Rutgers.
Yep. Cool. All right. Moving on to the next game. It was the big one. Had the number 2 10-1 Ohio State Buckeyes 38. The now number 10, at least according to the AP poll, 10-1 Indiana Hoosiers 15. Indiana looked like they had a real chance in this game early. The Hoosiers had an awesome opening drive. They ran the ball a little. They threw the ball effectively. They drew 2 PI penalties on Buckeye cornerback Davison Igbinison. Then Indiana got a stop, and it seemed like they were up to the challenge and like, whoa, this is really going to be a game. But that hope pretty quickly disappeared. The Buckeyes tied the game at 7, and then disaster struck when deep in Hoosier territory, the punter had one go through his hands. This was recovered by Ohio State, converted into a 4-yard Travion Henderson TD run. Then, early in the second half, star Buckeye safety Caleb Downs fielded a punt and returned it 79 yards for a touchdown. You could tell at that moment that it just wasn't going to be Indiana's day. I had to go back and rewatch the rest of the game later. That's when I had to leave for the Minnesota game. But I saw that punt return. I was just like, this isn't happening. And most of that comes down to the Buckeye defense, particularly that Ohio State D-line. Now, I said in the preview episode that I thought this was a legacy game for the Ohio State defensive line. And in my opinion, they played like it. They sacked Hoosiers QB Curtis Rourke 5 times, pressured him all day long, and Rourke was taking hits, like real hits. And he really struggled playing under all that pressure. Indiana, get this, only managed 151 yards of total offense. By far, its lowest output of the season. And 38 points is the most they've given up all season, too. On the flip side, Ohio State QB Will Howard had a fantastic performance, finishing 22 for 26 for 201 yards, 7.7 yards per attempt, 2 TDs, and 1 pick for a QBR of 86.8. Impressive stuff. In my opinion, it's time to start talking about Howard as a potential Heisman finalist. I don't think he should win the award, but I do think he deserves to go to New York, especially if he balls out against Michigan.
Yep.
Travion Henderson had 68 yards and 7.6 yards per rush. Quinshon Judkins got shut down, but Henderson had a nice day for Ohio State. And wide receiver Emeka Egbuka had 7 grabs for 80 yards and a touchdown. Carnell Tate had 4 for 68, and Frost sensation Jeremiah Smith had just 3 for 34, but it didn't matter. Indiana's defense didn't play terribly in this game, to be honest. Ohio State only ended up with 316 yards of offense, which is far below their average. Where the Hoosiers couldn't come close to matching up against the Silver Bullet was against the Silver Bullets defense and also on special teams. Hoosiers QB Curtis Rourke was an abysmal 8 for 18 for just 68 yards, 3.8 yards per attempt, 0 TDs and 0 picks for a QBR of just 42.6. He was constantly being harassed and, in my opinion, didn't show great pocket awareness. On some of the sacks, he did not seem to know where the pressure was coming from. So that's a weakness in his game I hadn't seen against other teams that Ohio State exploited. Running back Tyson Lawton had a decent day with 79 yards on 5.3 yards per rush and 2 TDs, but he was the lone bright spot on a struggling offense. The wide receivers were entirely shut down. Star Elijah Surratt had just 3 grabs for 40 yards. Nobody else had more than 13 yards receiving. It was brutal out there, and Ohio State's DBs and D-line dominated after that initial opening drive. John, what are your thoughts on this matchup of top 10 teams?
Well, I think what initially the downfall and took all the wind out of their sails was that muffed punt.
Yeah.
After that, Indiana you saw everything change. Their attitude changed, the way they were on the field, the sidelines, everything was just like, because obviously it handed Ohio State a touchdown right there and put them up. And it just was never the same. And then the nail in the coffin was definitely Caleb Downs' punt return for a touchdown. So that was, it was rough, man. And they just never recovered. And like you said, from at the beginning of that game in the first quarter, I really thought, and I had Indiana winning this in a close game.
Did you?
I did. I knew the potential of Ohio State, but I really believed that somehow this was like a year. I guess I've drank the Kool-Aid for Kurt Signetti. I fully have, and I still do. I mean, you're
oh yeah, he's amazing.
You're only lost to Ohio State. I mean, dude. So
yeah, he's a miracle worker.
Absolutely, and I knew how good this Ohio State defense is, but I still just felt like, I don't know, they're going to have this game plan. They're going to have this schemed up, and somehow they're going to pull it off. And it looked like it in that first quarter, that it could have happened. It could have gone that way. You saw Indiana was playing hard, both sides of the ball. They were super aggressive on defense. They were able to pick off Will Howard. Like, it looked like, oh crap, this is going to be a real close game, real back and forth. But like I said, mistakes killed that entire drive and killed that whole momentum for them for the rest of that game. And then obviously Ohio State's defense just woke up, and they've been notorious this year for starting out slow.
Yeah.
And it has bit them in the butt for that before. And I think it kind of hurt them against Oregon, and you've seen them kind of struggle in places where you're like, what's going on here? But once they're awake, it was game over. Rourke, I've never seen him get hit like that. I've never seen him get pressured that much. They essentially stopped throwing the ball in the second half. They couldn't
get open. They couldn't get off coverage.
Exactly. So they just continue to hand the ball off, and against that defensive line, what are you going to do, man? There's nothing you can do other than hope to get out of there without getting hurt. And
I think in the second half they were just trying to not hurt Curtis Rourke.
Yeah, which I understand. I do at that point. And also, you talked about it, about Ryan Day having that kind of wanting to prove to everybody of how good we are, and to show you, kind of an FU to the rest of the country of like, this is what we can do to you. And he did that, man. In that one decision after, I think they were like, I may be wrong here, but I think they were like, it was like 3rd and 25 or 3rd and something massive in Ohio State. And they decided to, and then I think they were able to get like maybe 10, 15 yards back. And anyone else at that point in the game probably would have punted the ball away. But Ryan Day was like, no, we're going to go for it because F you. Like, we can do that. We can do this to you. We can do this to anyone. And they did. And I think they gained like 15, 16, I don't know, something like it was massively successful play. And it was just easy. It was easy. And I think that was Ryan Day making a statement right there. And that's what this game was. Like you said earlier in last week, you said, I think this is going to be a statement game for Ryan Day to tell the national media and everyone else out there that this is the real Ohio State. We are the real deal. We will contend for a national title, and to shut up all the doubters. And well, he did. This is a team, like we talked about at the beginning of the season, that we picked as our favorite to win the national title. And I think they've now thrown themselves back into that conversation, not that they were out of it, but now in a more serious manner than what they may have been before. And I think they're right up there with Oregon. Yeah, absolutely. At this point in time, the way they're playing.
They show they can do it in all areas, and they can do it consistently, and they can just dominate you and destroy your will. And this Silver Bullets defense, man, is the best Ohio State defense that Ryan Day has ever had.
Oh, yeah.
It took a while. They've had issues in the secondary at times. But, man, other than those 2 early PIs on Igbinison, they just made, Indiana has 4 good receivers, and they made all of them disappear.
Yep.
And that's wild. That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
And then to dominate, I thought Ohio State was going to win up front in the line of scrimmage. It's why I picked them to win the game. But I thought the Ohio State offensive line would struggle a lot more being down 2 starters now. And they didn't miss a beat. They didn't. They look like my question for the Buckeyes was, do you still have a national title caliber offensive line? And I think they do. I mean, we'll find out for sure against Oregon in the rematch. But I think they do. I mean, they definitely passed, the Indiana test, and Indiana has a very good defensive line. They have Cade McNamara. They can, they've been good. So to dominate them like that on both sides of the ball was really impressive. And, Will Howard has improved as the season has progressed, and they still haven't needed to use him as a runner all year. So imagine against Oregon in the rematch, how much it will open up the running game when Ohio State finally bites the bullet and starts running Howard a little bit. Not a lot, but like 5-6 times per game. I think they do that against Oregon to try to get that bye. And I think that'll open things up for Henderson and Judkins like crazy.
Yeah.
So, and these Ohio State skill players, they're just all but unstoppable. And the defense just gets better and better after that disappointing performance against Oregon. Yeah, man, I would have said for most up until now, I would have said Oregon should be the favorite in the rematch in Indianapolis. I don't know if I think that anymore.
I think on a neutral field, man, it's a coin flip. It really is. I do,
but I lean Ohio State now in a way. Before I was leaning Oregon, now I lean Ohio State.
And it's just, I think you and I are in agreement that it's that defense. That's
it's the defense. That's what it is.
Telling me. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
And also Will Howard getting just more and more consistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like he needed to prove that he can be as good as Dylan Gabriel, and I think he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I wouldn't have said that after the Oregon game.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Buckeyes, it's all there for you. It'll be really interesting. I mean, and now we have the rivalry against Michigan. So you want to talk about, I think, man, Ryan Day, he might scheme up some shots. I don't even know if they're going to run the ball for a while. They might just try to score as many points as possible in the first half and then run the ball. Like once they get way ahead.
It's the first time I think for a while that I'm going to predict the game being an utter slaughter. I think
it's going to be a beating. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Michigan is just going to get utterly destroyed and ran out of the stadium. That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Wolverine fans. It's going to be rough.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Probably.
But I will say there is precedent for a mediocre Michigan team to beat, not since the 90s, but a couple times in the 90s, mediocre Michigan teams beat Ohio State teams that had national title aspirations. I just don't think Michigan has enough offense. And the problem for Michigan is that all their offense is based around running the ball, and Ohio State is the best rush defense in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And Davis Warren ain't winning that. Davis Warren, you're not winning that game on his arm. You're not. No. So if you can't run the ball, you're toast. Yeah. You know? Yeah. As for Indiana, because 3 SEC contenders face planted on Saturday, the Hoosiers might almost be in better shape now than they were before they lost to the Buckeyes.
Mm-hmm.
All they have to do is beat Purdue convincingly, and I think Indiana is in. In fact, depending on what else happens, I still think there's a chance, if the right upsets happen, that Indiana gets to host a playoff game.
Yeah.
Which, if that happens, I'll be there in attendance. So that's exciting.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So Hoosiers, like, I honestly, as much as it sucks to see your undefeated season come to an end, it kind of, I still think it's just, everything's just working out for you. Everything's just coming up, Indiana. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Yep. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah. And they still got a lot to play for. You know, they can still get into the college football playoff in the first, you know, I mean, beat a lot of teams to the college football playoff that
and
you
just
never thought Indiana was going to beat to the playoff.
And not only is this the first time your program has won 11 games, and now you're going to be the first time ever in the college football playoff and possibly host a game.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Some teams will never achieve that.
Ever. And Indiana, who's been the dregs of the Big Ten, Indiana, who's lost more games than any team in college football history, has shown that anybody can do it, man. Anybody can do it if you have the resources, and Big Ten schools have the resources.
Yeah, you hear that? You hear that, PJ Fleck? Sorry, what?
Dude, I think we're talking to Mark Coyle now. I think we're talking to Mark Coyle. Yeah. I think we're talking to the president. I think we're talking to the Board of Regents. I think that's where we gotta. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to Minnesota, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of, this next game is gonna be hard. We had the number 4, 10-1 Penn State Nittany Lions 26. The 6-5 Minnesota Golden Gophers 25. Minnesota came out and punched Penn State in the mouth. They forced a 3-and-out on Penn State's first possession, then executed a perfect 9-play, 70-yard touchdown drive, punctuated by a 20-yard Marcus Major touchdown run. Minnesota forced another punt, then moved 25 yards, and Dragan Kesich nailed a 48-yard field goal to put Minnesota up 10-0. There was pandemonium in the stands. I was there. It was bananas. Penn State then scored on a long pass where Minnesota just had a blown coverage. Like there was some miscommunication in the secondary. So that was unfortunate. But then what was really unfortunate was Max Brosmer compounded the mistake by throwing a bad pick into coverage. Minnesota's D bowed up, but Penn State was able to kick a field goal to tie. Then Minnesota gets a stop and blocks a punt. The next play after the punt block, Minnesota runs a double reverse flea flicker, which works for perfection for Max Brosmer, tight end Jamison Gears, to put Minnesota up 17-10. The Gophers were on the verge of another stop late in the first half. When, look, we don't talk about officiating much on this show, but we have to discuss it. The refs pulled an inexcusable flag on Gopher cornerback Ethan Robinson for a phantom pass interference. Not only did Ethan Robinson not interfere with the receiver, if anything, the receiver reached out and interfered with him. But 2 things. 1, the ball was way out of bounds. It was uncatchable. So you shouldn't have been able to call pass interference at all. But the announcers immediately said it was a terrible call right away. And that it should have, if anything, been offensive PI, as the wide receiver was the only one grabbing on that play. And the pass was uncatchable. So at most, that should have even been offensive holding, not defensive PI. It was one of the worst, most ridiculous, egregious calls I've ever seen in a lifetime of watching football. You cannot make that call. But Penn State was about to go into halftime down 7, potentially, with the Gophers getting the ball after half. So I don't know, man. I don't believe in generally in blaming the officials when a game is lost, but God, when it's number 4 Penn State, they're in the position they are, and you throw a flag on a play that was just clearly, I mean, there was no contact even. Like, I don't know what, like, there's no way you can look at that and see pass interference. There just isn't. Yeah. It's not like they were hand fighting and it was a judgment call, you know? It wasn't that kind of play at all. Penn State, you know, after that gave them great field position. Instead of it being 3rd down with them needing to convert, they got 1st and 10 deep in Minnesota territory, and Penn State scored a touchdown. There was a tiny bit of karma, it felt like, in that Minnesota blocked the PAT attempt and returned it the length of the field for 2 points, which was really exciting to watch live. That was crazy. That was bananas. There were also a couple late calls that stick in my craw a little bit. They were late in the game, but it really is that PI you just can't make that call. You just can't.
There was also a blatant face mask on Darius that the announcers also saw and said immediately, "Oh, looks like a face mask," and nothing.
Yeah, they ripped. You could see from the stands them rip his head around on it.
Yeah.
And they didn't call that. And that was in the 4th quarter, I think. Yeah. No, that was really bad too. There was, you know, they didn't even, that one hit in the middle of the field on Daniel Jackson, they didn't even review it for targeting. So there were some calls, but really, man, that PI, when there's no contact, I can see missing a face mask, right? You're not in position and it gets covered up. Sure. But like when you've got a receiver and a DB and there's nothing in your sight line, you can see exactly what's happening. Mm-hmm. That's just ridiculous. Yep. So instead of leading 17-10 at half, Minnesota led just 19-16 in a game they ultimately lost by a single point. So that's just brutal. That said, credit to Penn State. Tyler Warren, the star tight end, was shut down in the first half, but they figured out how to scheme him open in the second half, and he had a really nice day. Most importantly, James Franklin coached to win, while PJ Fleck regressed to old habits and got overly conservative with the game on the line. But we'll get to that particular rant a little later. First off, let's talk stats. Penn State QB Drew Aller had a good day, finished 21 for 28 for 244 yards, 8.7 yards per attempt, 1 TD and 0 picks. He bounced back to play really well in the second half of this game after being stymied a lot in the first half. The Penn State rushing attack was largely shut down. Nicholas Singleton managed 63 yards and a TD, but Katron Allen had just 10 yards on 7 carries. Minnesota did a good job stopping Penn State's gadget run plays too, by stuffing Tyler Warren and backup QB Bo Prabula. Tight end Tyler Warren once again saved the day for Penn State with his 8 catches for 102 yards. For Minnesota, QB Max Brosmer finished 15 for 23, 175 yards, 7.6 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 1 costly pick, and 1 inexcusable late unforced fumble. I mean, Max just dropped the ball. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. He caught the snap. He had it in his hands. He went to go hand it off, and it's just like he pulled his hands apart and the ball fell down.
Yep.
And then he had a chance to recover it, but instead of trying to recover it, he tried to push it to a teammate, which I don't think is even legal, but also just recover the ball. Like, pull the ball in. If you can get your hand on the ball to push it, you can get your hand on the ball to pull it in.
It seems very uncharacteristic of him.
So, totally uncharacteristic of him. So that, and both of those led to Penn State field goals. Mm-hmm. In a game that Minnesota lost by 1. Running back Darius Taylor had 58 yards on just 3.4 yards per rush. Marcus Major had 37 on 3.7 yards per rush. So in the second half, Penn State put the clamps down and mostly stopped the Minnesota running game. Star wide receiver, Daniel Jackson, from Minnesota, had another great day with 6 grabs for 90 yards. And senior Elijah Spencer had 2 big catches for 46 yards. Tight end Jamison Gears caught the touchdown on the trick play. John, we'll get into the PJ decision making, so let's not touch on this yet. But what did you think about yet another heartbreaking last-second loss by the Minnesota Golden Gophers, in this case to number 4 Penn State?
I mean, you highlighted everything that like I would really mention. I wish I had more to say if I hadn't seen it all so many times before.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm repeating myself, because I am, on this podcast already this year, on this podcast from last year from certain games. It just seems like it's more of the same when it comes to losing certain games. And I know we're going to get into that whole PJ decision-making thing. But it's also just, these mistakes or these meltdowns that happen at the most inopportune times. And it, like I said, not only uncharacteristic of Max Brosmer to do these certain things, but also just the team in general. When they seem to be getting on a roll and they're playing a certain kind of way, and then there's just like a total, mental breakdown. And like, that's the thing, that one thing costs you the entire game. And that's what happened, in my opinion. Obviously, the Phantom PI was major, and probably plays possibly the biggest factor into this whole thing. But there were other instances too of just, unfortunately, Max being the biggest perpetrator with the interception, and like you said, that fumble, which I watched happened, and they went and did the slow-mo replay, and he absolutely did. He had the ball, he turned left, and then his hands just went like that. And
I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, it wasn't that his like knee hit his arm, or like he like knocked it out himself, or ran into somebody or something. Whatever.
And he didn't mishandle the snap. Sometimes the quarterback doesn't get the snap and they're still trying to grab it when it wasn't that. He had it and then he just let go of it.
Yep. It was, I have no idea what to say about it. It's infuriating. I don't know what to do. I know that these players played their hearts out. I know they did enough to win this game. It's not, I am not blaming the players, other than, I guess, like, you could put some blame on Max for what happened. But
yeah, I
do think it's that the Phantom PI call and poor decision-making on PJ's part. And like what you've told me, somebody said that Franklin came to win or played to win, and PJ was playing to lose, or to find a way to lose. And that's what he did, which he's done before.
Yeah, when you start coaching conservatively, you don't win, you lose.
Yep.
Most of the time. And that's just it's not a lesson, PJ, and sometimes he's learned it. Sometimes he's been better this year. He has gone for it more on 4th down. He has been a little more aggressive. He's throwing the ball a lot more, stuff like that. So it's not that he can't adapt, but it's making the wrong decisions at times. When you need to be aggressive, you go conservative. And let's talk about it. So, first big decision, Elijah Spencer caught a pass and was running and nearly scored before getting just barely tripped up and landing on the Penn State 7-yard line. There were just under 6 minutes left in the game. And with 4 plays to score the go-ahead touchdown, down 4, this is what Minnesota ran. A slow-developing handoff that got stuffed on 1st down. A throwback pass to their star offensive tackle on 2nd down, which was never open. The Penn State defender saw it all the way. And even if he caught it, which he didn't, because he's not a receiver, he's a tackle. Even if he caught it, he's not going anywhere. Then finally on 3rd down, he took an end zone shot to Elijah Spencer. That's a good decision. That was incomplete. And then with just over 5 minutes remaining, down 4. PJ Fleck kicked a field goal. The thing about it is, the risk you run with that little time left, if you have to score again, is that you're not going to get the ball back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. Penn State got the ball, and Minnesota didn't get the ball back. So that was about the worst play calling I could imagine in that situation. Daniel Jackson and Elijah Spencer had both been getting open fairly consistently. And what you do when you need 7 points, you're on the 7-yard line. You know the run game hasn't been working the whole second half. You throw the ball 4 times because either Daniel Jackson or Elijah Spencer is going to score, or you're going to get a PI probably. And yeah, there's a chance there's a sack. And yeah, there's a chance you throw a pick. Sure. But you needed a touchdown to win. A field goal wasn't going to do it. With 5 minutes left in the game, you cannot depend, not against a high-powered offense like Penn State. It was one thing when we were playing against UCLA and Fleck punted and played to get the ball back late because their offense isn't very good and our defense is better than theirs. Yep. But against an offense as talented as Penn State, you can't give them the chance to beat you killing the clock. You have to go for the touchdown. And they couldn't cover Daniel Jackson, man. Even when they weren't throwing him the ball, they couldn't cover him. Couldn't cover him. Because no one in the Big Ten has really been able to cover Daniel Jackson outside of maybe Iowa for whatever reason. So that was about the worst play calling imaginable. And PJ defended that decision after the game, which worries me because numbers wise, analytics wise, that was completely the wrong decision. It just is. And here's the other thing. Let's say you don't get it, right? You go for it 4 times, you don't get it. They have it on the 7-yard line. If you're trying to force them to punt so you can get the ball back to score, you have them backed up way further than you'll ever get them on a kickoff.
Yeah.
You know? So even if you're thinking about the defensive aspect of that and getting the ball back on defense, you are still better off trying to score 4 times and then dealing with it if you don't get it. But you know what? Daniel Jackson was doing his thing, and I think they would have gotten it. I think they either score or they get a PI, the way things were going. That said, PJ's defense bailed him out. They got to stop. And it looks like Minnesota is going to get the ball at midfield, needing just a field goal from reigning Big Ten kicker of the year, Dragan Kesich, who was already 2 of 2 on field goals in the game, including a 48-yarder. So Minnesota likely would have needed like 1 first down to get into range, maybe 2 to make sure it's a shorter kick. And that's if you don't get a big punt return. But on 4th down, John, right away I noticed something was wrong. The up back was lined up weird. And as I realized the up back was lined up weird, and it was dawning on me what was about to happen, at the same time, my buddy Max blurts out, who sits next to me in section 233, blurts out, "It's a fake." And I was like, oh yeah, that's why the up back is lined up weird. So we start screaming, "Fake! Watch the fake! Fake!" from the stands. And look, I know. Okay. Somehow PJ Fleck didn't notice something that we noticed in the crowd, that James Franklin was clearly going to fake that punt. I know what PJ was thinking. He was thinking his star Frosh safety and punt returner Coy Parrish was going to house this return and win the game, or at least put them in field goal range and win the game. That's normally a great idea. But in this case, on 4th and short, when you have the momentum and your offense has been moving the ball, and James Franklin, you just have to know it's going to be a fake. I mean, dude, there's a video of like a 12-year-old boy who was at the game, and if you read his lips, he's saying, "I think it's a fake." So I saw it, Max saw it, some 12-year-old kids saw it. How did everybody in Huntington Bank Stadium see it except for PJ Fleck and Bob Ligashevsky, the special teams coach? How is that possible?
I was watching it. I had the game on at the arena I was playing, and one of my fellow band members, he looked at it and he said the same thing. And he's a Gamecocks fan, and he was just looking. He goes, "Oh, that's a fake." And I was like, "It's like really?" He's like, "Oh yeah, yeah." And like, and what happened? And he goes, "There it goes. There it goes."
Went for
That's
30 plus yards.
Yep.
And that was the game.
So, yep. It's not everybody. It seems like everyone saw it, but PJ.
Well, I just don't know game wise. Look, if it's 4th and less than 5, you should be in punt safe always. Always. You shouldn't. If it's that close for someone to fake it, you should assume that there's a decent chance they're going to fake it. And instead, PJ relied on the fact that usually James Franklin is too conservative. And he just assumed that he was going to be conservative there. But instead, it was PJ who was conservative and James Franklin who caught him with his pants down.
Yep.
And I don't understand. I mean, dude, for us to all see it in the stand, he had timeouts. He could have burned a timeout. And then you send your defense out there and you tell Coy Parrish to go back there and you say, "Hey man, we're not going to block for you. We're just playing defense. Fair catch the ball." And then you fair catch it, and then you got to move it like 15 yards to get a chance to win the game, like 20 or 30 yards to almost for sure win the game.
Well, and just to go to like another poor decision on his part we're going to go back just to backtrack a little bit on what the pass to Ariante Ursary and his decision to do that at that point in the game, at that crucial point in the game. And in the preview for the Wisconsin game, he was asked again about that. And his way of defending it was, well, you saw how well that flea flicker worked, and we executed that perfectly. And had that not gone that way, you guys would have been upset about that too. It was like, that's not the same thing, PJ. It's not. It was a different point of the game. Things were, that's not how that works, dude.
That was in the first half.
Yeah.
Not in the fourth quarter when you absolutely needed every play to work.
Yep.
You don't you don't run your cute stuff when you need it. No. They ran that on first down after a turnover. It was a great call. I give him credit for it. But also, Jamison Gears is a tight end. He's used to catching the ball and running with it. Ariante Ursary, dude, if you want to throw it to Ariante, wait till the bowl game and do it then when the stakes are lower. But against number 4 Penn State with 5 minutes left in the game when you need a touchdown, and you really think against that fast Penn State defense that he's going to be able, Ariante is a great athlete, but he's an offensive lineman. You really think he's going to be able to run it 20 yards and get to the end zone? Not 20 yards, but 10 yards and get to the end zone because you threw it to him behind the line of scrimmage? Like, I don't know, man. And we needed James, the bottom line is PJ Fleck snatched defeat from the jaws of victory because he simply got outcoached. And he got outcoached by James Franklin, a guy who is known for making bad decisions in big games. And Franklin made some bad decisions in this game that gave Minnesota a chance. Most notably, he sent out his tight end, Tyler Warren, to do a weird quick punt, which fooled nobody and went 16 yards and gave Minnesota the ball in amazing field position. That was unbelievably stupid, and it set up Minnesota perfectly. So James Franklin did some dumb stuff in this game. It's not like he didn't give us a chance to take advantage of the James Franklin mistakes. He did. He made some James Franklin, what are you doing mistakes? At least one. And I'm sure if I went back through the film and dug through hard enough, I could find something. You know what I mean? I'm sure I could find something else too. But when the game was on the line, James Franklin went for the jugular and PJ Fleck did not. It's like, my buddy James turned to me next and he's like, is PJ Fleck playing to lose by less? Is that what he's playing to, you know what I mean? Is that what he's playing to do? And I'm just like, that's what it felt like. And I know you can defend what you're doing, but like against when the other team is as talented as Penn State, you have to go for the jugular because they are gonna, because they have the talent to do that to you. They have the speed. They have that. And you have to be just as aggressive and smart back, at them. So, and I know that what some people are going to say. Some people are going to say, oh, you went 3-4 in 1-score games, and 1-score games are random. But that's pretty misleading. I don't demand that PJ win every close game. What I demand is that he make the right decisions so his teams have the best chance to win those close games.
Yeah.
And after PJ Fleck made 2 terrible decisions in the last 5 minutes of the game, either of which, if he had gotten it right, would have likely led to victory had he made the correct call, I'm at a loss with this. This has happened in too many close games. And we are on year 2 of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. We had the late game collapses against Illinois and Northwestern last year, the bizarre no-show against Purdue, and that was just a rough year. And look, that was a rough year. There were lots of injuries, blah, blah, blah. This year, there have not been too many injuries. This year, you've had some injuries, but it hasn't been debilitating at all. Yeah. They haven't been all at one position. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's not like you can point to that and be like, oh, that's why the Gophers are losing games. Like, they've been relatively healthy, as healthy as you can hope to be in a contact collision sport like football.
Yep.
So I'm torn, John, because like PJ Fleck does a lot of stuff really well. He recruits pretty well. He evaluates and develops talent extremely well. PJ gets fantastic buy-in from his players. They go to class. They get good grades. They don't get in trouble. They play hard. They love the program. Like, there are so many good things. But the players aren't the problem here. The in-game decision-making is.
Yep.
And PJ, after the game, claimed he made the right decision kicking the late field goal, which he absolutely did not. And anybody who's doing analytics would tell you he did not make the right decision there. And he brushed aside questions about the fake punt, which his squad was woefully unprepared for, despite the fact that it was the most obvious fake punt that I've ever seen. We were all yelling, it's a fake. And somehow Minnesota wasn't, So it's just a shame because the Gophers played really well. The Gopher defense held Penn State to 1 of 11 on 3rd down.
Yeah.
And they still somehow lost due to that fake punt. It's just such a waste of an elite effort from the Gopher defense. It's a waste of an elite effort from Daniel Jackson. The offensive and defensive lines played well. I'm not ready to get rid of PJ Fleck. He's done a lot of great things. You know, he went 11 wins, 9 wins, 9 wins in 3 consecutive seasons. But he has to bring in some kind of analyst to modernize his in-game decision-making.
Yeah.
PJ has improved in this. He threw the ball more this year, went for it more on 4th down. That's improvement. That's good. But he has to make smarter decisions, especially late in games when his tendency is to get more conservative than the math says he should.
Yep. I'm with you. And, and just one more thing I just want to add before we move on to Penn State, or move on from Penn State and Minnesota, is I want to kind of touch back again on the whole that SEC thing and how people are trying to discredit Penn State's position in being in the college football playoff as well.
Which is ridiculous.
They are trying to say, well, Minnesota, they barely beat their supposed bottom dweller, Minnesota Golden Gophers, which is just not true. It hasn't been for a number of years now.
25 years, really.
Anyone who's actually been paying attention, to seeing where like the final standings are generally year to year. Minnesota's not at the bottom. I feel like there are guys who are just going on vibes from like the mid 90s who still think in the media. It's like,
when the average media member no longer remembers the early mid 90s, everyone will be like, oh, wow, Minnesota's been this really successful program. But instead they think, I don't know, they always think that we're not as good as we are. It's weird.
Yeah. Or they somehow think that we're still like in the Brewster years, like, because that was such a blatant,
that was 4
mark.
years. It was 4 years.
Yeah. But that's what I think a lot of people are holding on to, which is ridiculous because it's like they forget what Glenn Mason did. They forget what Jerry Kill did.
What PJ Fleck has done.
Exactly.
PJ Fleck finished in the top 10, won 11 games, and finished in the top 10 of the AP poll in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that wasn't a million years ago.
Yeah. So the point is I will defend, and I have defended since this has happened, even though the loss hurts. I will defend Penn State's right to be in the college football playoff with one loss and just barely beating Minnesota because they beat a good team. Minnesota was in that game. Minnesota had many chances to win that game and very well could have. Penn State, you did what you had to do. James Franklin, good job. You made the right choices. PJ didn't. You won the game. Yep. You deserved it. You earned it. And you earned your spot in the college football playoff. And I will defend that. So any Nittany Lions fans out there, even though I know I'm bitter, I will absolutely defend your right to be where you are right now.
Yeah, people are like, oh, Penn State's only played one ranked team. It's like, yeah, they've played 5 bowl eligible teams in the best conference in college football. And beaten, all of them except for Ohio State, who's the second best and maybe the best team in the country. And they lost by a single touchdown. So, Penn State's a very, very good team. They have their flaws, which there are reasons why I don't think Penn State's going to win a national title, but I absolutely think they deserve to not only go to the playoff, but they deserve to host a playoff game. And they deserve to be ranked over Notre Dame, who lost 100%. To NIU and has played a really soft schedule. Schedule.
Yep.
So,
I want to see an SEC team in Happy Valley with below freezing temperatures, snow all over the ground. Yeah. Please make that happen.
Yeah, send them up. Send them up this year. Do it. See how it goes. Love that.
Yep.
Let's see how you do. Georgia, you said you'd crush Penn State. Mm-hmm. Crush them. Okay. Come do it.
Yeah.
Show up. Let's see how it goes.
Yep.
The last thing I'll say on this is that friend of the pod, Phil, just for what it's worth, is convinced that it's time for Minnesota to move on from PJ Fleck, and he wants that known loudly. And I'm just going to say PJ Fleck has built so much and is so close in a lot of ways. I don't know who's out there that you're going to get who's going to be better.
Also,
who's out there is going to be better.
Did you already tell people that he's an Ohio State fan, so he doesn't live in
He is an Ohio State fan. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I love you, Phil. And I hear you, but we don't live in the same reality that you do as a college football fan. That's not how it works for us.
No, continuity is, if you're not a helmet school, continuity means a lot. It does. Yeah. Because
I'm not saying there might
build that depth and you build to a system and talent over time.
And there might be a day where that comes, where I'll be like, yeah, dude, the PJ experiment's over. We got to move on. Sure. But today is not that day. And, it's disappointing, of course, but and PJ's just so close to, getting over that hump, more times than we can count at this point.
Minnesota was this close to winning 9-10 games even this year.
Yeah.
Very, very close. So it's hard.
Yeah.
You miss a couple kicks here. You have an onside kick, bad call there. Yeah.
But at a program like Minnesota, who has had pretty overall well-sustained success, you don't just drop your coach at this point anyways. No. That's not how that works for us who aren't the Ohio States of the world.
No. PJ Fleck does too much stuff well, and he's built too much of a program with continuity, with staying power, that it's not time to move on at all. I think I think what it is time, is to up his assistant salary pool and also to bring in an analyst who can help him with game theory, help him make decisions that are a little higher percentage, when you're in the clutch. And if he does those two things, I think, he can have a lot more success at Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, we should move on to the other games.
Yes, we are. All right. We had the number 25 Illinois Illini 38, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights 31. Brett Bielema stole one here. Dude. He absolutely stole it right out from under Greg Schiano's nose. So Illinois is down 31-30 when they send in the kicker for a desperation 58-yard field goal to win the game. But right before the snap, Rutgers coach Schiano called timeout. So this is important because Schiano waited too long. He screwed up. He waited too long to call timeout. By the time he called timeout, it wasn't in time to stop the center from snapping it. So the kicker kicked it, and the attempt was wide left and 15 yards short. So Brett Bielema said, wow, my kicker doesn't have that in his bag. So he sends his offense back out onto the field.
Yeah.
Star wide receiver Pat Bryant caught the ball at the 22. And then apparently the play is called church, according to Brett Bielema. And according to the play, Pat Bryant's supposed to catch the ball, get out of bounds, and then they kick the winning field goal. But Pat Bryant had other ideas. He decided to make a break for the end zone, despite the fact that the play calls for him to catch the ball and go down. After the game, Bryant said, quote, "Coach called a perfect play. I caught the ball, saw the sideline, saw nobody was over there. I had one guy to beat. I gave him a little move. I heard everybody jump and say, get out, but I put trust in myself and scored a touchdown." Close quote.
Honestly, that's like such a Brett Bielema, like that's very reflective on who his head coach is too. Like that's the attitude Brett Bielema
has. Did he call an audible mid-play? Yeah.
Dude, absolutely. Like that's why Pat Bryant plays for Brett Bielema right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love
that. This was a crazy back and forth game the whole second half, though. Before the game-ending touchdown, the teams traded TDs and the lead. QB Luke Altmaier put Illinois in front with a 30-yard TD run with 3:07 to go. Then the 2-point conversion put Illinois up 30-24. But Rutgers executed a perfect 2-minute drill, 10 plays, 65 yards, punctuated by a 13-yard Kyle Monangai TD catch. But then the Illini had 1:08 left, and they drove 75 yards in 8 plays for the win. Neither QB was consistent all day. Luke Altmaier finished just 12 for 26 for 249 yards, 9.6 yards per attempt, 2 TDs, and 0 picks. So Altmaier wasn't that accurate, but when he completed passes, they went for big yards. Altmaier also led the Illini in rushing with 74 yards on 11 attempts. Josh McCray at running back chipped in 58 on 13. But Pat Bryant was the offense on this day. The star Illini receiver had 7 catches for an insane 197 yards. That's over 28 yards a catch. And that final game-winning TD, that's bananas. Illinois DB Jaheim Clark had 2 tackles and 2 passes defended. For Rutgers, QB Ethan Cade McNamara completed just half of his passes, going 18 for 36 for 174 yards, 2 TDs, 0 picks. Ethan had his moments, but just wasn't consistent enough in this one, which has long been the knock on him. Rutgers running back Kyle Monangai had another productive day, going for 122 yards on 4.4 yards per rush. Cade McNamara also had 84 yards rushing and 2 TD runs. Rutgers wide receiver Ian Strong had 6 catches for 66 yards and a TD to lead the Scarlet Knights. John, what did you think about this one?
This is exciting. This is a really exciting game. And, I know the stats say what they say. And obviously, Illinois looked much more efficient with Altmaier and you got Pat Bryant because, you got Pat Bryant. What else do you really need? But in a lot of ways, I felt like I was watching very similar teams. They yes, Ethan didn't end up being that great, but at certain points of the game, he looked really solid and had some freaking moves running the ball too, by the way, which where was that a year ago? So he's moving more fluid. He's throwing the ball more fluid, for the most part. I know he's inconsistent, but when he's on, he looks really good. It's just that Luke Altmaier is on more often than not. So, And Altmaier too was able to run it in as well, and has some fantastic legs for that. So yeah, it was really cool to see. And then you also saw Hank Beatty have some really clutch moments too within the on the Illinois offense, and I think the punt return as well, which was amazing. So I just think, this is just a Brett Bielema team, man. It really came down to who was gonna grind this one out at the end. Who's the tougher team, and who's going to play harder? And I think we said this at the beginning of the frickin' season, dude. So many people were doubting Brett Bielema. I even heard people talking about how they should think about moving on. Illinois not going to be there. Like maybe he'd do better at a different school. Blah 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 blah. And you and I were like, stop doubting this man.
Seriously,
have you all forgotten what he did at Wisconsin? And this man is meant to coach in this conference. He is perfect for this conference. I don't care what school you put him at. Yes, he'll have higher, he'll have maybe more advantages and higher percentages of winning at certain programs, but I don't care where he's at. He'll find ways to have a good year and a good season. And now Illinois is probably going to win 9 freaking games.
9 games.
Which, who
at Illinois, it's a lot.
So the fact that Brett Bielema gets so much out of these guys every year, and sure, he has a down year here and there, but overall, these guys are bought in every year, all the time, and they produce. And I think what he showed here within this game, which was really tough, it was back and forth. Kyle Monangai had a great game. He's tough to stop. Ethan Kaliakmanis had his moments, but these guys didn't quit. And I think also, again, talk about coach in-game decision making. Who screwed up? Schiano, calling that timeout. Who took advantage of that in the biggest way possible? Brett Bielema. That's what it comes down to, man. And that's why you don't doubt this man. Bert is not to be trifled with. He will hurt you when you are vulnerable or you're doing something you're not even aware of. He will see it and he will exploit it. And that's what he did. And I'm impressed, dude. Look, Illinois did better than what most people thought. They did better than what I thought. I picked them to win 8 games, and now they're going to win 9. But I think most people
they had the easy schedule this year, and they're capitalizing. They're capitalizing on an easier schedule.
Yeah. But even still, people thought they were only going to win 6 games.
Oh yeah, 5 or
So,
6. Yeah.
I think this is congratulations to the Illini. Congratulations, Brett Bielema. As much as I still have so much animosity towards you for what you did to us at Wisconsin. I have nothing but the utmost respect for you as a head coach, and it's amazing what you're doing at a basketball school.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. It feels like Bielema pulls a win out of thin air like this once a year in a game he has no business winning. Last year it was Minnesota. This year it's Rutgers. You cannot count out a Brett Bielema team until the clock strikes 0. So, and I mean, they're playing Northwestern this week. I can't imagine Northwestern's going to win that game. I don't think they have enough offense. So yeah. And Rutgers can still get to 7-5, which would be a little disappointing with preseason expectations, but a very solid when you look at program history for sure.
Yeah. That's still a huge that's a lot of growth from where they were. Just a few short years ago.
Could have a chance to win 8 games. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right on. All right. Next up, we had the 7-4 Iowa Hawkeyes 29, the 4-7 Maryland Terrapins 13. This one, Ben, went about exactly as I expected. Iowa led 13-0 at the half. They led 19-16 or 19-6 after 3 quarters. They won the game 29-13. There was a brief moment when Maryland cut the lead to 19-13, but Iowa answered with a 4-play, 80-yard touchdown drive on 4 runs, punctuated by a 68-yard Kamari Moulton touchdown run. Iowa got an interception 5 plays later, and that was pretty much the end of Maryland's hopes in this one. New Iowa QB Jackson Stratton was mediocre. He did complete 10 of 14 passes, but for just 76 yards on a paltry 5.4 yards per attempt with no TDs. But what did I say in the preview? It almost doesn't matter who plays QB for Iowa because the QB's job is to turn around and hand the ball to Caleb Johnson and sometimes Kamari Moulton. So Johnson ended the day with 35 carries for 164 yards, 4.7 yards per rush and a TD. Moulton had 12 carries for 114 yards, 9.5 yards per rush, and the TD. Iowa's receivers didn't do much, and they don't have to when the running game is clicking like it was against the Terps. Iowa D lineman Ethan Herkett had 6 tackles, including 2 tackles and 2 sacks, and 3 tackles for loss. So awesome game for him. For Maryland, QB MJ Morris finished 12 of 23 for 103 yards, just 4.5 yards per attempt, 2 TDs and 2 costly picks. Billy Edwards was 5 for 8 for 26 yards before getting hurt. Maryland really missed Billy Edwards in this game. MJ Morris just isn't as dynamic of a passer as Edwards is. Maryland didn't run the ball very effectively from the running back position. And what else is new? Only ended up with 98 yards rushing. John, what did you think about this one?
Yeah, it went exactly as you said, and exactly as I thought it would as well. This Maryland defense just is not good, just not good at all. I expected, I guess, I mean, a little bit more from Jackson Stratton, which is funny because I just texted you. I was like, watch, like all of a sudden Jackson Stratton is like, I have a feeling he's just going to look really good, which, I mean, he didn't look terrible, but he was not fantastic, of course, but he didn't need to be. Because I knew how bad this Maryland secondary was and just their defense overall. But, they went with what was reliable and what they knew they could turn to, which was Caleb Johnson and Kamari Moulton, even though Kamari Moulton, fumbled on his first carry of the day, which was seemed like it could have been pretty disastrous, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
They were able to obviously rebound from that pretty quickly. And Caleb Johnson ended up having setting the Iowa single season rushing touchdown record.
Wow.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You are going to do great things in the NFL next year.
Great stuff.
Can't wait. Gosh.
We're going to cheer you on, Caleb.
Yep.
Godspeed.
You go, Caleb. Yep. Just, gosh, give it your best shot, buddy.
Yeah. And just don't come back to college for any reason.
Hope to never see you again on the field in college. So
yes.
You go, buddy. You take over. Anyway, so
and he should, because he's had a huge year.
Yeah, I mean, he absolutely should. Running backs especially, I think that's the smart thing to do. You have such a short lifespan in general. So when it comes to playing, so and it was just also funny. Like it was, Iowa's defense was solid. No, this is not the Iowa defense that we're used to seeing from Phil Parker, but it was still very good. Maryland's longest play of the game wasn't until the third freaking quarter, which is insane. And it was not really that long. So, you saw flashes. Obviously, Ty Felton did what he was going to do. You saw him make some amazing catches and make MJ Morris look good. But I do think, losing Billy Edwards Jr. was just, that was it. Once he went out of the game, there was no shot.
No.
So it's tough.
Nope.
It's just a tough break for Maryland. I don't think they would have won either way, but maybe it could have been a little bit closer had you had your starting quarterback out there. But there's no stopping Caleb Johnson and this, really good Iowa offensive line as well. And that's all it really took. So, unfortunately, Maryland, I don't know where it is moving forward with you either at this point in time. I know the conversations have been like thrown around over the last few years, but it seems like it's getting a little louder when it comes to decisions, when it comes to Uncle Mike and what to do in College Park.
Yeah, I mean, Loxley's about to go 4-8. In my opinion, the two Big Ten schools that should think about moving on to their next coaches are Maryland and Purdue. Yep. Loxley is a lot better than Ryan Walters, don't get me wrong. But if the absolute pinnacle for Loxley is 8-5 last year, that's the best. He had a generational quarterback, and he got to 8-5, and that's it. Yeah. Is that enough to keep him in place? I'm starting to wonder. His teams always start hot, but they don't improve as the year progresses, and they usually end on a losing streak like the one they're currently on.
Yeah.
So, if Maryland's a tough job, but you can get skill talent there. So maybe with the right coach, it could work out. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what Maryland decides to do, or if they give Loxley another year. I don't feel like it's going to get much better. I feel like we've seen what we're going to see.
Yeah, I feel like he would just be better going back to being an offensive coordinator, dude. I
Totally.
feel like, yeah, like that. He's just a better coordinator, and I love him, dude. I hope he stays in the Big Ten. That'd be awesome. I love him as a personality. I think he's fun to have on the field. I think he's a really smart offensive mind, and I think he develops quarterbacks really well. So he's definitely an asset. Like somebody I think should definitely grab him if he ends up losing his job as a head coach at Maryland.
Yeah, for sure. And then last thing on this game, it's just this is what Kirk Ferentz wants to do. He wants, his QB's out. He's got a good O-line, a great running back, good backup running back. Just F it. We're going to run these guys over. When Iowa's good enough to do that, they're very tough to stop.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we had the 6-5 Michigan Wolverines 50, the 4-7 Northwestern Wildcats 6. I don't have a ton to say about this game. It went about the way I expected it to, although Michigan scored more points than I anticipated. I think when Northwestern was down 10-3 and they had the ball and it was 4th and 3 from the Michigan 8, why, David Braun, are you kicking a field goal? You know how bad your offense is. You know Michigan has some of the best athletes in the conference. You know you have some of the least athletic players in the conference. So down 7 in a game where you're outmatched and you're going to have limited scoring opportunities, what are you doing kicking a field goal on 4th and 3? I thought that was a terrible coaching decision by David Braun, and I think it's worth criticizing him for. I feel bad for star senior Northwestern linebacker Xander Mueller. He's a great player and has been for years. He had 9 tackles and a first-half interception, which he returned for a ways when the game was still close. He gave the Cats great field position, put them in position to score points in the Michigan red zone, but the Cats mustered just a field goal off of that great play. Michigan QB Davis Warren had a decent day, completing 26 of 35 passes, 195 yards, 5.6 yards per attempt, 1 TD and 1 pick. Running back Khalil Mullings had a nice day with 12 carries for 92 yards and 3 TDs. So that's a really impressive job by him. And backup QB Kamari Moulton, wrong team. Donovan Edwards did well also with 65 yards and 6.5 yards per rush and a TD. All told, Michigan ran for just over 200 yards on the ground. Wide receiver Tyler Morris had 7 catches for 64 yards, while star tight end Colston Loveland was held to just 3 for 22. Warren spread the ball around to 11 different receivers over the course of the game, and Michigan star DL Kenneth Grant had 3 tackles, including a sack. John, what did you think about this one?
This was just Michigan's defense being too much for Northwestern. Overall, I think, and unfortunately Northwestern just not having enough offense to be able to get over that mark of, I think they stalled out numerous times in the red zone when they would finally get moving along and looking like they were going to make something happen. It just, it ended up going nowhere, obviously, or settling for a field goal. They were overmatched. This is just talent. This is a talent thing. Northwestern just doesn't have it right now. No. And it was very apparent. It wasn't like Michigan was just, I know the score said it was 50-6, but it wasn't like it was just crazy amounts of fireworks everywhere all over the field. It was just methodical. Grind it out. I'm going to run at you because we can, and we're going to throw the ball when we can because we can. And Davis Warren this was his best game of the season. Yeah. So yeah, there's not much to say. I other than Michigan did exactly what they should have, having the talent advantage that they do, and that's it. I too feel bad for Xander. I think that it's got to suck, man, when you're that good and you're hoping and you're loyal to your team, but they just can't seem to get around you and rally around you and rise up to your level. So but I'm sure he did all he could, and good luck to him. Maybe he'll be able to get drafted somehow. I got to imagine he will be. He's good. He's really good. Yeah. So I hope he can. I hope he can have a good career. And I have nothing but respect for the guy. So
yeah. Oh, I forgot to do Northwestern stats. Two stats quick before we move on.
Sure.
Northwestern had 11 yards rushing on 1/2 of 1 yard per rushing attempt. Jack Lausch, 10 for 21, 106 yards, just 5 yards per attempt, 0 TDs, 2 picks for a QBR of 9.8.
Yeah.
A QBR under 10. So Jack Lausch isn't it, man. He's not. So I don't know what Northwestern's thinking, but they got to go a different direction at quarterback, I think.
Yeah.
Or else it's going to be another long year next year. All right, moving right along. Next up is the surprise of the day. So, John, I got to do a little humble brag. I was 8 for 9 on my Big Ten picks this weekend.
Okay.
And the only game I got wrong was this next one. The 6-5, now bowl eligible for the first time since Barack Obama was president, Nebraska Cornhuskers, 44. The 5-6 Wisconsin Badgers, 25. It's the only one I got wrong this weekend, but boy, was I wrong. I watched this whole game back yesterday. I was struck by 2 things. 1, Nebraska played with a ton of urgency and physicality from the opening snap. 2, Wisconsin lacked intensity and toughness throughout the game from the very beginning. Wisconsin was very much not ready to play. So much not ready to play that when Nebraska gifted Wisconsin an early fumble on the Nebraska 17-yard line when the game was tied at 7, the Badgers managed 5 yards in 3 plays before taking a penalty to make it 0 yards in 3 plays. And then on 4th down, kicker Nathaniel Vakos missed a 34-yard chip shot field goal. At this point, it was 7-7, so that was a bad miss. Later in the half, trailing 14-10, Wisconsin drove 73 yards, only to stall near the red zone. And then the kicker Vakos missed a 41-yard field goal. So at this point, it's 14-10 Nebraska, but it should be 16-14 Wisconsin. However, it didn't matter because Nebraska ended the half with a 76-yard touchdown drive to make it 21-10. That should have ended the half. But then, with 17 seconds left, instead of taking a knee on his own 25, Luke Fickell called a running play on his own 25 with under 20 seconds left in the half. That is a terrible decision. You're not going to score in 17 seconds, certainly not running the ball. So why not take a knee there? But Fickell didn't take a knee in boneheaded fashion, and running back Tawi Walker fumbled the ball. It was recovered by Nebraska, who promptly ran 2 plays, then kicked a field goal. So instead of being down 21-10 at half, Wisconsin was behind 24-10. That is just bad coaching from Fickell. I don't know what else to call it. That was a Mario Cristobal level idiotic play. The Badgers might as well have not even shown up for the second half because Nebraska dominated on offense and defense, extending the lead to 34-10 before Wisconsin finally woke up and did something on offense. But by then it was too little, too late. The route was on, and there was no stopping this Cornhusker offense. QB Dylan Raiola for Nebraska was an impressive 28 for 38, 293 yards, 7.7 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 0 picks for a QBR of 84.6. That might have been his most complete game all year, so props to him. Running back Emmett Johnson led Nebraska with 113 yards and just 16 carries. Dante Dowdell chipped in 41 and 3 TDs. In the receiving game, Raiola spread the ball around, but Emmett Johnson and wide receiver Ja'Cory Barney led the way with 85 yards receiving each. For Wisconsin, Braden Locke had one of his better performances, going 20 for 30 for 292 yards, 9.7 yards per attempt, 3 TDs, and 1 pick. That's a lot better than he usually does, to be honest. Yep. But the Badgers really struggled to run the ball as top running back Tawi Walker managed just 55 yards on under 4 yards per rush. Wide receiver Vinny Anthony was the bright spot on the offense with 7 catches for 137 yards and a TD, but it was all too little too late in a game where Wisconsin got blown out. So, John, this was a crazy game. What are your thoughts on this unexpectedly lopsided tilt?
Well, I got to say this first. Everyone, you heard it here first at We Live for Saturday. Not Cover 3, not On 3, not Josh Pate, not JD Pickell, not ESPN or whatever. I am saying right now, 2025, Nebraska Cornhuskers, undefeated, national title, all the way. This proves it. I need no other evidence, no other proof. This is it. All things are fixed. All things are right in the world. We can now finally talk about it because no one's done that. No one's been doing that. And I'm so glad that we can say that here today on We Live for Saturday. So, in all seriousness, congratulations on making a bowl. It is a long time. You have every right to be happy and excited. I know people are making fun of you for rushing the field and all that, but you know what, dude, it's a fan base that's really tried hard to stand by, and it's been struggling, and so enjoy that. And honestly, because you beat Wisconsin, go for it and have fun even more. I'm fine with that. I have no issues. You guys played well. Nebraska played incredibly well.
Yeah.
Both sides of the ball, and absolutely deserved this win. And they did it in convincing fashion. Wisconsin there was no point in the game where I thought Wisconsin had a shot.
No,
not a single point in the game.
No.
Nebraska controlled from start to finish, and there was no question that who the better team was on that field.
It pushed them around.
Oh yeah. And I thought I was with you. I thought it was going to be a close game.
Yeah.
But I thought Wisconsin was going to come out angry after what happened against with the Oregon game.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to come out motivated, but they were utterly defeated. And
there was no intensity.
And it was so surprising, and especially at the line of scrimmage. They got beat all over the place.
Yeah.
And this is just something you and I, who have been watching the Big Ten, and especially obviously Wisconsin, for years and years and years and years and years before Nebraska even came onto the scene. And this is something that is just unprecedented. I have never seen a Wisconsin team like this look this bad. I think you brought it up. You texted me either today or yesterday, since 93, 92.
I mean, it's been 22 years since they missed a bowl.
This is
since then.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to say about this Wisconsin team. I don't know what's going on in Madison. I don't know how Luke Fickell, other than the fact that he's very defensive. So he obviously must know that there's something terribly wrong. He has fired his offensive coordinator. It sounds like there's other possibilities of things going on, some changes, which I'll let you touch on here in a bit. But I gotta say, this was a great win for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I've always said, as much as I make fun of Nebraska fans, I have never had anything but faith in Matt Rule being a good coach.
Yeah.
I think he's a great coach. I think as much as, you and I may have our feelings about Dana Holgorsen, I think obviously this is a game where he shows that he can add something. He can be an asset.
Oh yeah.
So he schemed up an amazing game. So congratulations, you got that going for you. You made the right move, even though you never should have freaking hired him in the first place. But you got rid of Satterfield.
Yep.
And we called that from the first second
from the beginning. Yeah.
But this is great. This is good. This is momentum. Even if you end up losing to Iowa next week, the fact is you're bowl eligible for the first time in 8 years. Celebrate that. Enjoy that. Especially to certain, I think Matt Rule, Smock, Patrick, Peter Meister.
Yeah.
Some of our guys out there, others too. If we've missed you, sorry, but we're really happy for you and enjoy that. So, but I'll let you touch on more with Wisconsin.
Yeah, I dubbed this in the preview episode the Disappointment Bowl because both second-year coaches have underachieved so far relative to expectations, but there's a clear winner and a loser. Nebraska is the winner. They look ascendant. Wisconsin looks like they're a total mess. So the rumor now is that Luke Fickell is going to, from our source Scooby, is that Luke Fickell is going to fire his defensive coordinator, or at least demote him, Mike Tressel. Fickell has already fired his offensive coordinator, Phil Longo. Generally, when a coach is underachieving and fires both coordinators, that's a desperation move to try to save his job. Wisconsin needs to win this week against rival Minnesota to prevent missing a bowl for the first time in over 20 years. And Luke Fickell, what we're hearing is that he's not necessarily on solid footing job-wise going into next season. So he's in a prove-it year with two new coordinators. And if he doesn't deliver the goods next season, there's a strong chance he gets fired. That's crazy. Everybody acted like Wisconsin won the lottery when they hired Fickell. He took Cincinnati to the college football playoff. He's got that Ohio State pedigree, ability to recruit Ohio at a high level. How could he possibly fail? But yet here we are. He's potentially going to miss a bowl at Wisconsin for the first time in over 20 years. And the program, aside from recruiting pretty well right now, looks like a total mess. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big game. This Wisconsin-Minnesota game is a big game for both teams. We won't get into it now, but like the loser of that game, it's going to be a long offseason.
Well,
because
I won't. Oh yeah, and because I won't be available for the preview, I do just want to give a little bit of thought onto that, and just briefly is I'm just hoping that what Wisconsin did after an emotional loss to Oregon, I pray to God, PJ, you saw that, you recognize it, you saw what happened with Wisconsin, that you don't do the same thing when we show up on Friday in Madison. There's no reason Minnesota should lose to this Wisconsin team. This is one of the worst Wisconsin teams I've seen in 20 plus years.
Yeah, so, it's a rivalry game. You got to come out ready to go. I agree with you.
Yeah, obviously anything can happen because it is a rivalry game. I get it, but PJ, capitalize. Do not screw this up for us, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all.
All right, John, we have our weird, because we're on StreamYard, we have a 2-hour block. You can see the recording. We have 4 minutes for the Battle of Los Angeles. So the 6-5 USC Trojans 19, the 4-7 UCLA Bruins 13. The Trojans overcame a game where they reportedly had 27 players plus some staff members out with the flu when they practiced on Tuesday. USC completed a 4-yard pass to wide receiver Jacoby Lane for a TD halfway through the fourth quarter. From there, the defense forced 2 turnovers on downs to end the game. USC QB Jaden Maeva finished 19 for 35 for 221 yards, 1 TD and 0 picks. Running back Woody Marks was effective with 76 yards on 4.2 yards per rush, but it was wide receiver Kyron Hudson with 6 catches for 79 yards and wide receiver Mekhi Lemon with 2 for 69 to lead the Trojans in receiving. USC got lucky as they had 2 fumbles, but recovered both of them. And UCLA QB Ethan Garbers finished 20 for 29 for 265 yards, 9.1 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 0 picks. So it was a good game for him. Running back TJ Harden had 98 yards and 7 yards per rush. Good day for him. And wide receiver J. Michael Sturdivant, 4 grabs for 117 yards to lead UCLA. So what happened? Here's what happened. The Bruins were just 3 for 11 on 3rd down and a fatal 0 for 3 on 4th down. That's what doomed UCLA in a game that was very even both on the field and the scoreboard. UCLA was also undone by 8 penalties for 65 yards. John, what do you think about the battle for Los Angeles?
Yeah, where I saw this, it was a pretty evenly matched game. Ethan Garbers, I honestly thought Ethan Garbers looked really, really good. TJ Harden looked really good. J. Michael Sturdivant, holy cow. You know, and obviously, I mean, USC, Maeva, and Marks made their impact, but the problem with both of these schools, which we talked about at the preseason, is that they still have issues at the line of scrimmage.
Yes.
And that's what I saw, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So you saw USC being able to capitalize on that a few times and be able to stop the Bruins from being able to continue to move the ball up the field. So, you know, it was a close game. And the ball kind of bounced in USC's favor in their way. And I thought both teams played respectably. But it really could have gone either way in the way from what I saw from this game, because I liked what I saw from both ends. I do actually think Garbers, even though I know the stats are different, are a little different. I thought he played a little bit better than Maeva.
Yeah.
But
he for sure did.
Other than that, that's all I got. But way to go using Woody Marks when he was effective. Look at that. He was effective.
Yeah, and USC was really good on defense, and that was the difference. I will say, man, Maeva, he missed a 3-yard touchdown pass high. 3 yards standing there, and they ended up settling for a field goal early. I said it before, I'm gonna say it again. Maeva isn't it. It's Lincoln Riley. Hassan Longstreet, the true Frosh, better be ready to play next year, because Maeva is not it. So I think they got a lot of, if they're not going to get a transfer quarterback, and it seems like they're not, they've got a lot of eggs in the Longstreet basket. They better hope that he's something else.
Yep. Well, before we leave, if you want to find us, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Podcast Addict. You can find us at We Live for Saturday, or you can find We Live for Saturday at We Live for B1G Sat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher, and you can email us, We Live for Saturday, B1G@gmail.com.
Awesome. Thanks for listening. Have an awesome Thanksgiving, everybody. And we'll be back with the preview episode, so you have something on your holiday travels to listen to. I'll be putting that out on Wednesday night at the latest. All right. Thanks, everybody.